Is it a psyop or is it serious? That's today's topic, guys. Some of you are going to get your feelings hurt. Now, hey, I apologize in advance, but you're coming into my house and you're asking me as host of this house what my opinion is on different topics. Okay, the very first thing we need to talk about is the newest reveal that has appeared across the YouTube social media scape. It's the one most of my emails are about right now. People are asking me for my opinion, and I want to thank you for asking me because it shows that you basically hold it in value. And that's a compliment. But it concerns the Cabbage Patch Kids. It concerns this new video that took YouTube by storm. All of you have seen it, or most of you have, about the Cabbage Patch Kids. And I'm going to tell you right now to be very, very careful about this type of disclosure. And I'm going to tell you why. I have over 1,000 titles in my PDF library. These are all the old books that I can find from so many different sources that I plan to do videos on. Remember, I tell you guys all the time, it's become a joke. But I tell you guys all the time, I got 500 more videos in me. I said that 200 videos ago. So it's never going to change. Until the day I die, I've always got 500 more videos to go. Listen, I have never in all my research, and I do consider myself to be one of the most well-read individuals around, I have never seen anything like that was in that Cabbage Patch video movie. And this is a red flag for me. Am I telling you it's not true? No. What I'm telling you is that only two things can be possible here. One is that the people who put this Cabbage Patch video together found material for which the rest of the world had missed. Somehow we never seen any of this. We were never able to put it together and all that. Now, if it's a psyop, it would be one that was done and conducted by an intelligence agency. If that video is a psyop trying to get people to go down the wrong direction, then the intent behind such a revelation is to get a bunch of truthers on board and get them to validate it and get them to stand behind it and to get into lure them into a new rabbit hole while also releasing more information from a different perspective that confirms it. This is step two. Step two is the postcard babies. It's a totally different video. It too is very popular right now. I am not telling you that these are fake. I'm not telling you that these people are lying to you. I'm telling you to open up your minds to the possibility that this is a deep fake and it's designed to lure a bunch of people down another rabbit hole in order to produce by videos into the truther community a third or a fourth video that will then dismantle all of that and make everybody who followed it look like an idiot. Yes, this is a very popular method of an attack. Yeah, guys, we're in an information war. I tell you guys all the time, we are in an information war. It is not just geopolitical. It's through every echelon of society. So when it comes to the Cabbage Patch Kids and the postcard babies deals, we need to take into consideration that no one else is coming out with this data. Where do you find it? I have never seen these postcards. I have not seen one in my hands to verify. They look so photoshopped, it's pathetic, but I'm not going to give you a rendering opinion on that. I'm not telling you that these are fake. I'm telling you that the verdict is still out. I don't know because I need more information, and I need more than just optics. I need these people to show us where they got this information, where these postcards were kept until all of a sudden they found all 100 of them and published them in a video. I need to know the provenance of the material. I don't need to know their interpretation of images that the rest of the world has never seen before. So that's just me opening up this video. We're going to shelve Cabbage Patch Kids and the postcard babies aside as an unknown at the present. Right now, if you ever quote Archaics, you need to say that. Archaics doesn't know anything about that. Archaics wants to see Archaics wants to see actual physical evidence. We cannot go by images. Remember, guys, we don't go by images. No, not at all. So we need to know that this is really important, because this is a rabbit hole that opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. That's why it's important to know fact from fiction concerning this whole phenomenon here. Because if it's not true, then it means a trap has been set. If it is true, then it means the Phoenix phenomenon is more real than I have conveyed to you. Because I told you in 1902, it wasn't just the things that I documented, but all the edits to our reality have erased whole periods of history for which we can find no evidence of. So I'm ambiguous. I cannot say yes or no on that issue. So we move now to ancient aliens, Galactic Federation. They're in the same category. There is no distinction between the two. I have already said in the past, these are deep fakes. These are fakes. There's nothing real about the Galactic Federation. There isn't a single person on YouTube that can show a shred of evidence on the existence of an extraterrestrial species that is here to benefit mankind. None. Can't. If you think there are, give them my email. They don't exist. Pleiadians, the Arcturians, every bit of this is adult fantasy. That's exactly what it was designed to be. Don't think for a second that cosmic awareness, Galactic Federation, ancient aliens, all the whole narrative of Pleiadians and Arcturians, don't think for a second that those were not Alphabet Agency psyops from the very beginning. Yeah, I'm not buying it. Now, yes, Von Daniken, yes, Zechariah Sitchin, Jacques Vallée, all of them. You can group them all together. Do they provide evidence of high sophistication in ancient history? Absolutely yes. Do they provide evidence of human abduction phenomenon? Absolutely yes. Do they provide evidence of anomalies where humans believe they're being abducted by extraterrestrials? Absolutely yes. So why isn't all this true? Because it's not. The race that we need to watch out for is subterrestrial. And they use the alphabet agencies and everybody else to promote the lie that these are coming from space when they're not. All this phenomena from agroglyphs and crop circles, cattle mutilations, human abductions, human implants, UFO technology, all this comes from our underworld. It does not come through the atmosphere. That's an impenetrable barrier. So we've covered that, which leads to MIB, Men in Black. We've all seen the movies. Men in Black. So, fact or fiction, Men in Black. I'm going to tell you right now, it's an absolute fact. Absolute fact. And I'm also going to tell you something that's going to be very interesting. The Men in Black phenomenon was only popularized by Hollywood in late antiquity. In late history in our times. But the phenomenon appears in books from the 50s and 60s on the UFO phenomenon. But even further back, it goes back centuries, when sometimes people mistook Jesuit and Dominican agents for men. They described them as just unusual. And during the plague years, and there was many plague years, but during the plague years, right before plagues broke out in obscure areas throughout Europe, Men in Black were seen through the streets at night. People saw them. These were MIBs back then. The Men in Black, they look human when you look at them, but sometimes they were seen to have bird-like faces. They had bird-like faces, and they would be in the black attire of the times. In our time, they're in really nice designer suits. In the 50s, they were in designer suits with ties and hats. Yeah, 500-600 years ago, the Men in Black were in robes and kilts and all that kind of stuff. But the phenomenon apparently is very old. The Men in Black are manifestations or agents of those who are subterrestrials, and they walk among us, disguised. Remember, They Live, the movie from the 80s, was a documentary. Now, so we've done Men in Black. For those who want to understand the Men in Black phenomenon much better, watch the movie Adjustment Bureau. Okay, flat earth. There's a large body of people that listen to my presentations, but they never make comments. The reason I know this is because many of you have sent me emails about other people on YouTube who have said different things, and I'm very big on syntax. I'm very big on the way people construct the things they're trying to convey. And yes, a lot of things have been borrowed from the archaics paradigm, from my presentations, and that's cool. From the very beginning, I said that I wanted other content creators to share my material and to use it, and basically I'm just trying to raise the bar across the YouTube scape. And I think I'm doing it because there are some channels that seem to be falling by the wayside, and that has no fault. It's no fault of mine. But there are other channels that started producing some really good material. And sometimes they produce videos that are very similar in vein to mine 4, 5, 6, 7 days after I have released a video. And every bit of that is acceptable because we're all in this together. I don't mind being a trailblazer. I don't even mind not being cited as a source of inspiration. That's cool with me. But when it comes to flat earth, I have noticed that some of these channels, they really, really dislike me. And I don't know why, but flat earth to me is a stepping stone. Flat earth is a dead end. It opened up the modern mind to thinking outside the box, to realizing that there is another paradigm accessible to us that goes far beyond the scientific parlance, that goes far beyond the perimeters that science has basically laid before us. And we realize with the flat earth research that our world is not what we think. Something very, very wrong is with the way the world has been presented to us through science, through established education. Flat earthers have done a fantastic job, but it's not the end. It's a conduit. Once you've gone through and exhausted that research, what are you going to do? Watch 100 more flat earth videos and just keep staying in that same paradigm? Where's the growth there? From the beginning, I have stated that flat earth is a stepping stone into another paradigm. And that's where I'm at. Simulation theory, simulation hypothesis, the ability to be aware that our world is far more complex than a globe. It is far more complex than a globe going around a sun. And it is far more complex than a flat, endless, planar expanse. So, flat earth, my assessment is the research is very valuable if you're passing through. Remember, we're sojourners, we're pilgrims. We're not meant to stand still. We're meant to learn, we're meant to experience. We are the prodigal sons. The world is not. Remember the parable of Jesus, the prodigal son. One son disobeys the father, takes his money, his inheritance, spends it on prostitutes, goes around in parties, drinks, gets beat up, loses his wealth, has to work, ends up begging, travels the world, and becomes wiser for it. Returns home, and there's a feast with the father. The son that never left home, but blindly obeyed, never grew wiser for anything. And there was no reason for the father to be joyous by his staying there. There was no reason for the father. That son did not grow. That's what I'm basically telling you, is that the errant is going to move forward. There may be a theory in the future that archaics will embrace that goes even beyond the confines of simulation theory and puts this whole construct together from a spiritual perspective that's far beyond anything we've entertained thus far. It's all about baby steps, and one of those steps is flat earth. If a bunch of you get pissed off at me for that, so be it. So be it. Next one is lunar wave theory. So you guys already know that I promote, to me it's a fact that the moon is a hologram and it may hide something else and it does not act like a lunar body. Now, some of you have sent me, information about Crow 777. I don't really know the material. I think I watched one video and it was just a picture of the moon for like 30 minutes. And I guess it was him narrating. I'm not really familiar with this material, but I'm on board. I'm absolutely on board. If Crow 777 is of the opinion that the moon is holographic or something similar to holographic, and that stars have often been seen, even the Russians published it, that they had photographed stars through the dark part of the moon, which is impossible if the moon is a solid. So my issues with the moon go deeper, though. Russian scientists in the 50s, 60s, and 70s published a series of reports, and I have cited those in my Chronicon, where they published the material that their data showed them that the moon is either absolutely hollow or it's just not there, and that we're seeing something that's not real. The Russians published this in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The Russians never had a lunar project. They never intended to send a man to the moon for this reason. They knew way before NASA knew that something was very wrong. Their data showed stars through the dark part of the moon, but they had done magnifications on the moon and they had seen anomalies that didn't make sense. But the pure arithmetic of the dimensions and density of the moon precludes the moon from being a physical body that close to our world. If our world is truly a globe, there is no way that our gravity well would allow for the existence of something the size of the moon. It is the most gigantic lunar body in our whole entire system if we go by the scientific data. That's if we go by the scientific data, because the moon is 1/4 the mass of our world. Jupiter has like 27 moons, and all 27 moons combined don't even equal 1/4 of the mass of Jupiter. Not even close. Yeah, the moon should be ripping our world in pieces. It should be fracturing our world. The tidal stress would be monumental. There would be a collision. The Russians published that it's impossible. What we're seeing in the sky is impossible. So yes, Crow 777, the archaics stamp of approval. There it is. Crow 777, good job on the lunar wave deal. Now, I can go into more depth about the lunar wave. It may be different than Crow 777, but that line that he documented passing over the moon, that line could very well be passing over the entire stellosphere, the entire sky. Multiple times per second, that line can be perceived because it's a stellosphere. It is a holo field that's rebooting every 7 or 8 times a second. That line passes over the entire sky. He just saw it on the moon because that's what he was recording. By virtue of everything that I just described to you, I'm going to tell you right now, lunar landings, the moon landings, absolutely fake. Absolutely fake. And it was a genius psyop, because the entire, almost about 98% of all NASA actually believed they were sending men to the moon. That's how a psyop works. You involve everybody. You get them to do their jobs, even though their jobs has nothing to do with what's really happening. So, relative dating methods, they have to be entered here, guys. I cannot express to you how important it is to understand fully what many researchers have discovered when they go back behind these scientists and they research carbon-14 dating, when they research potassium-argon dating. All the radiometric dating systems rely on constants. They rely on a false premise that the breakdown of radioactive isotopes has always remained constant and will always remain constant, but it's already been shown that that's false. However, nobody's rewriting the science books. Yeah, it's not just, those are just 2 of them. But I mean, we've already seen how dendrochronology has now been disproven. Sometimes 3 rings will appear in 1 year. It all depends on how many times that tree got wet. Also, the ice core dating is fundamentally wrong. The deposits are by storm. It has nothing to do with years. The whole idea that each little layer of ice represents a year is so juvenile. I can't believe it was ever entered into peer-reviewed study. That boggles my mind. But the truth is, there still isn't any affirmative way to date anything in the past outside of actual chronology. So, yeah, it's relative dating methods are absolutely fake. Once this enters your mind, once you understand truly that all these dating methods used by science to show hundreds of millions of years, or 250,000 years plus or minus 30,000 years, all this is absolute arbitrary BS circular reasoning. They have already dated megafauna at 10,000 BC. So, every scientific test of carbon-14 that doesn't support the 10,000 BC is thrown away. I don't know if you guys know this, but other scientists have already published their problem with the scenario. And the problem is they'll take 60 radiometric samples from one site. But when they publish the research, they'll only say 7 different radiometric samples were taken from this site and confirms that this mammoth dates to 10,000 or 11,000 BC. Totally omitting 63 samples that didn't comport with what they wanted it to say. This is how science has been doing us from the beginning, guys. So, having said that, we go into evolution and natural selection. You guys already know it's all bullshit. Most of you know the whole idea that man came from monkeys is absolute bullshit. Every bit of it is. Natural selection and evolution, and for about 60 years, they perpetuated the Piltdown man hoax. Science has never apologized for that. All the history books, World War I, World War II, all after World War II, all the way up until the 80s, they perpetuated this as absolute proof that we came from hominids, monkeys. They built an entire skeleton based off 2 teeth. Do you believe that we can take 2 teeth and then have an artist draw the whole skeleton and then call it something that is the ancestor of humans? If you believe that, you'll believe anything. Especially considering that when DNA was analyzed in the late 80s, it was found to be pig's teeth. They weren't even human. They built the Piltdown man off of pig's teeth. But the scientific books were never rewritten. You're still descended from a monkey. So we're done with that one. Mud fossils. Oh shit, he's about to talk about those mud fossils. I love that system glitch. If that was true, then why are there still monkeys? Hey, you know what? You're absolutely true, because the dragonflies, grasshoppers, spiders and flies, cockroaches, jellyfish, and regular normal fish, amphibians and reptiles that are all walking around in your backyard of your community today are the same life forms we find in supposedly 100 million year old fossil rock. Yeah, the whole thing, science is full of shit. You know that. Christina the Astonishing, how you doing? Tell Jay I said hi. Mud fossils. You want to know about mud fossils? Archaic's stamp of approval. And I'm going to tell you why, but it's not for the reasons you think. Mud fossils gets the stamp of approval. Many of you have sent me emails about Roger of Mud Fossil University. Now, I will be the first to admit I'm a little turned off by the idea of biological life forms being able to be so big as he demonstrates in his videos. I'm turned off by it. But can I say he's wrong when I'm the one bringing to the table all this data on the vapor canopy? I can't, because the vapor canopy would have allowed for that. In addition to that, I am of the opinion that the vapor canopy has been at a diminishing degree during the pre-flood world. Meaning, at one time, the atmospheric pressure could have been so intense and the oxygen density be so massive that it would have easily supported the creatures that are of the size of Roger of Mud Fossil's theories, and what he shows with the biological materials embedded in stone, or the stone itself being of carbonaceous material. Listen, I'm on board. I'm still a little turned off. I'm always going to be honest with you guys. I'm still a little turned off with the idea of some of these giants being that big. But we could be talking about different time periods. Remember, archaic sticks to the historical record. I don't talk about what was going on 20,000 years ago. I don't care. It's beyond anything far. It's too far back. It's beyond 5239 BC. But these gigantic life forms could have lived in a vapor canopy world that was far more intense than the later vapor canopy world of the historical record. When we have the Anuna, when we have later the Titans, the giants, and normal-sized humans, when the vapor canopy collapsed. Further, the reason why I can give the mud fossils the stamp of approval is that carbonaceous material we have a lot of documentation from the historical record of biological materials falling out of the sky. Remember, the Phoenix phenomenon laid down hundreds of billions of tons of fine red dust. Some areas, because of the humidity, it was red mud. When it hit the ground in 1902, scientists studied it, and they confirmed that it was blood. Yeah, I'm not making this stuff up. I have cited these sources, guys. You can find them yourselves. This right here is very interesting. It changes the whole idea of what's going on, what the Phoenix is. It's very unusual what is happening. So carbonaceous material being found on mountains and hills and all that. And if these were life forms before that got petrified, that too is a part of the Phoenix phenomenon. Remember, guys, petrified squids, petrified octopus. I have a couple videos. The whole world, when the whole world froze. If you guys haven't seen the over 100 images of fossil anomalies, these aren't normal fossils. Fish giving birth to other fish. Fish in the middle of eating other fish. Animals in the middle of fighting each other. Yeah, crazy. Animals in the middle of swallowing. Jellyfish turned to stone while they were in the water. Doesn't make any sense. None of it makes sense. So, yes, I'm on board. I'm definitely on board with there was a time in history when the entire world froze. And when it froze, all these gigantic life forms for which Roger and others are showing could have happened. So, yes. Am I going to entertain it on my channel? Probably never. It just boggles my mind. It's outside the scope of the historical record. That's why I can't really bring it into the fold. In the historical record, the highest I can get for giants is maybe 15, 16, 17 feet. And that's from the tombs and sarcophagi that have been found during the historical record that have been documented. Beyond that, in the past, the world could have been a much smaller place, which means everything would have been super gigantic, just as Roger of Mud Fossil says. But it would have been a prior biosphere with a much thicker vapor canopy, not the one that was like the one in the pre-flood world. So it does get the approval, but it's still beyond the scope of the historical record. Tartaria, there's another one. Tartary was a vast Central Asian region. Any historian can tell you that, and they can show you the basic perimeters of that area. It was also populated by many different cultures. It was like a breadbasket of ethnicities. So that aspect of Tartaria is very true. So the Tartarian narrative as put out on YouTube today is absolutely false. Just there's no truth to it. It's gone far beyond anything that can be historically verified. So I'm not giving the stamp of approval on Tartaria at all. I'm just not going to. Oh, I see no evidence of it. It's Tartary. And it's the period of the Khans and Genghis, and it is the merging of this wild, unruly Mongolian culture, and as it spread all over the world with the people that it conquered, and basically assimilated with its outskirts, which were all Christian. Yeah, there was no Tartarian empire. There was a Tartary, and there was Tartar kingdoms and all that, but this whole worldwide phenomenon of a Tartarian, it doesn't exist. I mean, and there's people who admit that, like Autodidactic. He even said, we know it wasn't a worldwide deal and all that, but it's basically become the name of the ancient anomalies we research today. So I appreciate Campbell's being so candid about it, because he and I had talked about this before. But as far as the resets, as far as the Antiquitech that's a part of the Tartarian narrative, absolutely. 100%. Archaics, stamp of approval. I'm on board. But this is the domain now of really great researchers like John Levy, Robert Seifer, Autodidactic of Australia, and there's others. I'm not familiar with them, but like these guys, they show pictures, they show ancient texts. These guys are showing that there is whole periods of our history for which we cannot account for. There are genuine anomalies. There's Antiquitech, evidence of Antiquitech everywhere, but there's no historical citations showing that it's either been edited out by human agency, or it's like I propose with my Phoenix phenomenon, that not all the material of the past that's supposed to be hidden from us was necessarily edited out. Some of it was left for discovery. Now, yeah, so John Levy, Robert Seifer, Autodidactic, they got my stamp of approval, like they really care. But what I'm saying is I value their material, because they're not promoting this fantasy version of this. On some of these Tartaria channels, is just ridiculous what you see. Well, what passes for evidence. So yeah, there was resets. There was an Antiquitech. There's no doubt about it. And there are civilizations for which we don't have a trace of mention in the historical record. Next one on the list, my friends, is Gematria. Oh shit. What's Jason going to say about Gematria? My friends, many times in my Chronicon, I know a lot of you've read it or are reading it, or you can go to Nick T's channel. You can go to Nick T's channel, and he's still reading. Oh, I need to start promoting him more. I keep forgetting. Listen, Nick T's done a really good job. He's done like 50, 60, maybe he might be on 70 something videos now. He reads Chronicon in 5 to 7 minute sections. Yeah, go to Nick T's channel and check that out. But in Chronicon, I mentioned Gematria many times. And I show the Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek words and their geometrical significance to the passages that they're found in. References to ancient happenings in cities, and even the coordinates of places where the prophecies themselves were fulfilled. Gematria is real, and it's real because we live in a mathematical construct. Therefore, there's always going to be ways to use arithmetic to find out deeper meanings of the world we live in. Gematria is very real. Now, there are many species of interpretation of the holofield around us. That means there's many different types of gematrias that would be of use. This is why Michael Drosnin, when he published the Bible Code, he could definitely find all kinds of coded references in the Masoretic text that was in Hebrew, because those letters and those words translate to numbers. And he was able to see when these were transliterated through this little mathematical coding of the Masoretic text into English that provided whole names and phrases of people who are ruling in the world today, and the names of cities. Michael Drosnin's work brought attention to that. It's called the Bible Code. but there was really no follow through on that. That system needed to be honed in better, because you could also find misinformation in using that very same system. So gematria is real. What it boils down to is, do you trust the individual? Because a lot of the interpretations are subjective. So you have to find a personality that you have faith in, that they are interpreting the geometrical values and attaching them to the right stigmata or the right phenomena. So gematria is real. That doesn't mean those who practice it are necessarily right all the time. Big distinction. So, gematria gets the archaic stamp of approval. It's mathematical science. However, like I said, a lot of it is subjective. You have to find someone who you trust. Now, there are people who have done a very good job in their presentations. Some of them are like Logan of Decode Your Reality. He's very good at that. He's got a whole little clique of decoders that study all kinds of different things. There's another guy I've never mentioned before, but he does basically the same thing. He has his own little system. He goes by Tom Numbers. Now, some of the people he associates with, they hate my guts, but that's okay. That's okay. But the gematria and the deciphering of our reality through a mathematical lens is basically all they're doing. So they get this stamp of approval, no doubt. Believe me, I can even show appreciation for my haters. I got no problem with it. Here's the next one. 666 is not the number of the beast. We had to clear the air with that real quick. Listen, there's a Papyri 115. Papyrus 115, or I think it's Papyrus 115. Dated to the 3rd century AD. It was a recent discovery, like in 2011, 2012, sometime around then, 2014 or something like that. It made major news at the time, but it showed that the oldest New Testament writing ever found dates to the 3rd century. 300 years after the alleged birth of Christ. So it's the oldest New Testament ever found in the world. And the number of the beast in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verse 18, the number of the beast is not 666 that we have today. That was created by Rome. The number of the beast is 616. It is a palindrome. So we'll just clear the air with that. I've seen that question several times. It's something you can Google. There's a lot of reports about it, but I'm going to tell you what you're going to find as well. The fact is that the oldest Christian manuscript in the entire world for the New Testament shows 616 as the number of the beast. That's a fact. The second fact is that the Christian establishment has spent a prodigious amount of energy trying to explain how that 616 was just a mistake. They do not want to admit that the publication of 16 billion Bibles has been wrong. They don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit that all these translations, they have paid so many people to put out articles and all kinds of stuff to try to explain why the 616 was an error. It's not the truth. It's not right. But it is. It's the oldest New Testament available. And the Roman Church never thought it would have been found. So that's what happened. 666 is fake. In gematria, though, like in Hebrew gematria, 666, it translates to total authority, and it's not necessarily bad. But here's a quick fact: 2815 BC was the finishing of the Great Pyramid. Great Pyramid was completely done in the year 2815 BC, and if my memory serves me right, 2815 BC minus 666. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. My memory didn't serve me correct. It took 90 years to build the Great Pyramid. This is in Chronicon, which is 1080 months, 1080 months. and the 1080th year of the Annus Mundi calendar, the project was complete. So that would have been in Chronicon 2905 BC was the beginning of the Great Pyramid project. That's when the Great Pyramid was begun. It ended, it took 90 years, but 666 years later was 2239 BC, the Phoenix phenomenon, collapse of the vapor canopy, the total destruction of the world back then. It was 666 years after the foundation of the Great Pyramid was laid. That's pretty interesting. But that's all in Chronicon. I go into a lot of detail about 666 and how it's used, and how it's used when the moon comes into play a lot of times in the historical record, lunar anomalies. So anyway, we're going to move on. Astrology, archaic stamp of approval. Got it. I'm going to tell you why. All right, it's basically for the same reasons of gematria. We're studying phenomena in a holofield. Now, I don't believe those planets are there. I don't believe the stellosphere is anything that we're told by science that it is. But that doesn't mean that for thousands of years, cycles and epicycles and patterns have not been studied, and the phenomena of beginnings and endings on all kinds of things have been watched for, because I know this for a fact. I have seen many of the translations in Asiatic researches and in other publications of the Royal Astronomical Society, all through William Cortis's scientific books, especially the Smithsonian reports on astronomy. I've seen all these. In the translations of these ancient cuneiform texts, they have entire field studies of astronomy in cuneiform from 4,000 years ago, where they were reporting everything that happened whenever the stars were in certain patterns. So astrology comes from ancient astronomy. So I am on board with the fact that these horoscopes are real. I told you guys many times, I have given out hundreds of copies of the for free, because it's not mine. It's just out of copyright. Anybody can freely produce the book. It's called The Influence of the Zodiac on Human Life. I've given so many free copies of that out to everybody who asked in emails, because I was shocked when I read it. I read Gemini. It hit me to a T, even pointed out my faults. And then I was so shocked by it that I turned around and had to start from the beginning. I read Aries. I had to make sure that the other 11 zodiac signs did not conform to my personality, and they didn't. The book was published in 1893. So, yeah, absolutely. The stellosphere, the whole stellosphere is packed with coding, and that humans have been looking at it for thousands of years and documenting different things about human personalities in accordance with where the wandering stars and the moon and the sun were and what houses. Yeah, absolutely. There's no mystery here for me. So astrology would be very real. There's no doubt. The problem, though, astrology has the archaic stamp of approval. Astrologers, per se, do not, because it's entirely subjective, meaning we're dealing with a real holofield that has real data that can be extracted, but you've got to find the right people to trust. Not everybody who claims to be an astrologer is doing that. Some of them are just grifters, and they found a really easy way to make money. So you got to find out. There's some real ones out there, and then there's some fake ones out there, and then there's the controlled psyops of the alphabet agencies that are out there for a reason, that are promoted, like Gene Dixon. So, yeah, that's all real, guys. Hell yeah! If you think those intelligence apparatus doesn't use the psychics and the astrologers and all that, you got another thing coming. So, empaths, archaics, stamp of approval. What? You guys are surprised to hear that about me? They're very real, guys. In fact, it has a lot to do with the individual as well. Remember, I told you before that it's never the method, it's always the man. which translates to woman as well. So the empath community allows for a lot of manipulation. It allows for a lot of scamming. I don't have to tell you this. You guys already know. You guys already know. They pop up on YouTube and they get their 400, 500, 600, 2,000 subscribers, and then they plateau out. And the reason is because they're fake. And people perceive that. People are basically intelligent. And they know. They can separate fact from fiction. They can realize, oh, okay, well, this person here, they're fake. Nothing's real about it. So then there are those that you see on other platforms or here on YouTube that have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of followers. Listen, to get that and maintain it means that they're doing something right. So you can't take anything away from them. You don't have any evidence to say they're not empathic when so many people believe they are. It is entirely subjective, but the subjectivity alone is evidence that something very real is happening and that people agree with it. So there are personalities here on YouTube that you can trust. They claim to be empaths and they demonstrate it. So yes, it gets the archaic stamp of approval. Just like I'm with the same mouth I'm telling you that, I'm also telling you there's a whole bunch of charlatans out there. Watch out. Watch out. So accuracy entirely depends on the individual. I got a whole video on tarot cards, so you already pretty much know my attitude toward that is because it involves the greatest amount of subjectivity. And that's saying something. You have a deck of cards, 78. You have 78 cards, which allows for thousands of projections and possibilities. Each card has multiple different ways it can be interpreted according when you put it in juxtaposition with another card. Whole readings can be manipulated in so many different directions. This is what makes the tarot card industry so very dangerous. Yeah, I already understand some of y'all are pissed, and I get it. I got tarot card readers that hate my guts right now, but it'll never stop me from telling you what I know about it. It's entirely subjective. If I was to take a tarot card reader and put them in the next room right here and take another tarot card reader in this room with me right here, and I gave them the same series of questions, just 3 questions, that person over there can do their reading and this person can do their reading, and I promise you those readings will not be commiserate. They'll be drawing different cards per reading. Their interpretations are going to be different. It's entirely subjective. Yeah, it's very easy to know the trajectory of events and then run tarot cards and claim that you're predicting the outcomes. So yeah, I'm not with it, guys. Does not get the archaic stamp of approval. Are there tarot card readers that are trustworthy? I absolutely believe that. But you know what? Tarot doesn't get the archaic stamp of approval. Those individuals do. Those individuals, tarot just happens to be the medium by which they're allowing their empathic and psychic abilities to flow. The actual tarot deck isn't shit. It's a bunch of paper. It's the individual that's important. So, I'm going to move on to Soul Trap. Guys, my problem with the Soul Trap is the fact is that not one single person who has ever died ever came back. None of you can contend that. You can scream NDE all you want, but that's exactly what it is, a near-death experience. It's not real death. Therefore, the individual personality was not totally severed from the avatar. They were still a part of this world. So whatever they went through is no different than what we go through in REM sleep. And if the body understands that there's a trauma unfolding and the mind is in overdrive while we're in sleep, then of course the necessary frames of reference to put a story together as to what's going on is going to be built. And people who snap out of it and come back with these stories of things they see. We don't know if the imagination constructed a story while they were comatose, while they were out, while their avatar was not functioning. But to claim these people died and came back is a leap. The reason I can't give it the stamp of approval is because not one of them died. They all came back to tell us of their experiences and all that. Some of them have come back with a soul trap experience, talking about going to the light was a trap. How do they know? They could have never went through the light, or they wouldn't be here. It's a story. It's something that's been implanted into the human collective psyche, and now it's being told and retold by multiple individuals. Are they experiencing these things? I can say yes. I can agree. I will not call them a liar. But is it an accurate interpretation of what's going on? How do we know? Some of them are charlatans. Some of them are attention seeking, and they're just telling their story because it gets them on YouTube. Some of them are legitimate. They almost died. Almost died. They didn't die, or they wouldn't be here. So they tell a story of what happens after death. Sometimes it's a beautiful scenario. Sometimes it's a hellish scenario. But the whole concept of heaven and the whole concept of hell are man-made constructs. And they're so deeply ingrained into the human psyche that to experience visions and dreams that comport with that wouldn't be a mystery at all. So for them to come back out of their experience and think that they had died and tell the story of having gone to hell or having gone to heaven is nothing but the construction of frames of reference by which the mind had available to it when it was going through the trauma. So no, I'm not on board with the NDEs. I am on board with NDEs. They happen. That's why it's called NDE. It's a near-death experience, but it's not death. They didn't die, so they can never be cited as an authority of what life is like after death or what happens after death, because not one of them died. I'm sorry if you don't agree with my logic, but I have to stand by that. I cannot admit to the fact that somebody has ever died and come back, because it just hasn't actually happened, no matter what we call it. So yeah, it's the soul trap. So I'm not saying soul trap doesn't exist, but there's not a single person that can give us any evidence of it. It's an interesting theory, but I mean, it all depends on, what you consider good proof and evidence. And it's not acceptable with me. Antarctica. It's on the list because you guys keep emailing me about it. Antarctica may be a genuine anomaly, but there's nothing from the historical record that I can tell you that you can't already see on YouTube videos alone. Modern books, modern articles, and modern YouTube videos and stuff are the only evidence out at all that anything unusual is happening with Antarctica. Now, other evidence can be from different treaties that the United States and other nations have signed about Antarctica and the dates of when those treaties are no longer in effect. That's very interesting. But as far as Antarctica goes, it may be a genuine anomaly. I am admitting another unknown, just like at the beginning of this video, the Cabbage Patch Kids, the postcard babies. I am admitting that I am withholding my opinion about Antarctica. It very well could be a threshold to a whole nother series of continents, which would now make sense of anomalies like the Voynich manuscript, which is only one. From what I understand, there's 3 different books that have been found that are like the Voynich manuscript. Voynich is just the most popular one, but there's 2 others that are inexplicable. A language and illustrations that do not seem to belong to our world. Of flora and fauna and people engaging in activities that's absolutely inexplicable. So that cryptologists using advanced military hardware and software systems can't even decipher the Voynich manuscript. That's a problem. That means that it belongs to a civilization for which we've had 0 contact. How did that book get here? So, the Voynich manuscript, and there's other anomalies in the archaeological record, would make more sense if Antarctica was a barrier between our continents and other continents. But I need to see more evidence, so don't quote archaics. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying I'm still open to the possibility. And the last one is mainstream media, MSM. Listen, guys. If nothing makes sense, if ABC, BBC, all these major network news pundits, If all the major headlines around the world don't make sense anymore, when they did make sense in the 40s, they made sense in the 50s. You got a New York Times or a Washington Post in the 1980s, things made sense. You understood the trajectory of events. But the problem is, today, since 2020, nothing makes sense. News agencies are reporting things that are far beyond anyone's ability to believe anymore. But they're promoting these things as if they're really happening. They're facts. It's because that's the agenda. If the news is reporting things that do not make sense all the way around the world, things that should be the exact opposite to be true, things that are so unbelievable that politicians are doing, or new laws that are coming back, then that's the intent. The intent is to sow chaos. The intent is to lower your vibration. The intent is no longer to report the news. The intent is to guide the public vibration. Well, in several presentations, I have addressed that the grays look just like a human fetus that has had some other type of DNA inserted into it to finish out its maturation into a walking form. It's very servile. In the UFO literature, the people that have been abducted in hypnosis, and I've read a lot of the UFO abduction phenomenon stuff about 10, 15 years ago. And I'm always telling people to read The Watchers by Raymond D. Fowler, and it will lead you to other books. But they describe like beings that are Nordic, and subservient to them are the alien grays. But the alien grays are perfectly described, they're shown in cave art all around the world. The alien grays are the fairies of old Europe. They're the ones that used to be in the fairy rings and created crop circles. The alien grays are the little people in ancient tales. They are probably just as older than the human race itself. They've been here, but they've been in the underworld forever. They are not at all from space. They're not from any time in the near past. It would have been at least 5,000 years ago if they ever came from space. But it was before the simulacrum was intact. But like I said, all this is it's not even a mystery to me. I mean, the whole Niflheim, the concept of Midgard as the world, and Asgard as heaven, and Niflheim is the realm of the dead, and it's in three parts, and one of those parts was the realm of the elves, and those elves are those little gray aliens. That's how they're described, and so I'm on board. The whole legends of Shambhala and all these underground civilizations in the past. There's a lot of truth to those. There's a lot of truth to those. The whole human abduction phenomenon is made to look like it's ETs and all that, but they're being taken to laboratories in the underworld, and then they're taken back out and they're released back into the public with their implants. In my Dark Scriptures playlist, I show proof after proof after proof after proof that you can verify for yourself that what we call the Bible was taken from hundreds of different sources. From ancient Babylonian libraries where they had put together the history of the world, and Jewish redactors constructed the Old Testament from myriads of sources. And that's what we have is the Old Testament. So is it a legitimate series of historical documents that were put together? Absolutely true. Absolutely yes. Was it rewritten through a Jewish lens? Absolutely yes. Is it most of it pre-Jewish in context? Absolutely yes. It was Babylonian. But the Babylonians got it from the Amurru. They got it from the ancient Westerners who had brought it in. You know these Amurru as the Amorites. The fifth dynasty of ancient Babylon was the Amorite takeover. That's when all this knowledge was introduced into the Near East. And all the knowledge of the ancient world. This is why the ancient American traditions on giants and the flood and the Noah's Ark and all that absolutely mirror the Old Testament records, because that's where they originally came from. Those stories are not native to the Near East. They were imported. During the vapor canopy, amphibians and reptiles grew to astonishing sizes, and we have many examples of many animals that grew to huge sizes. This is the origin of human titans. And when the vapor canopy fell, there was no more titans, couldn't grow as big anymore. Many of them died out and suffocated. Their offspring were giants. And then in the very next generation, the giants gave birth not to more giants, but to humans. Got smaller because the vapor canopy was gone. Well, this is the same thing that happened to the animal kingdoms. This is the same thing that happened to all fauna and flora. Everything reduced in size because the oxygen content had been depleted. You ask me about dinosaurs. I don't know if the dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex are actually real, or Stegosaurus, or the Allosaurus or Brontosaurus. I don't know if those creatures are actually real or not. I don't know. I've never been on an archaeological dig. I just don't know. But as far as gigantic animals, like the mega, I mean, even science admits they exist. They call them megafauna. But that was mammalian and marsupials. But yeah, there's been a lot. You know, the biosphere of the vapor canopy would have promoted growth in amphibians and reptiles. Because even today, if you put an amphibian or a reptile into a controlled environment that never gets cold, and it's always humid, and it's always got enough light and it's got enough food, they just don't stop growing. They get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is why we found 50 and 60-foot boa constrictors in Central America and South America. It's so dinosaurs, I don't know. I really don't know. Large, gigantic reptiles and amphibians, yes. I don't know about the acidic nature of deal. This is beyond the scope of the archaics research. I don't really know about it. I do know that scientists are now reporting the unusual nature of the double helix formation of DNA shows palindromes that are arranged in sequences that seem to be turned off, as if junk DNA isn't junk at all. It's latent, meaning it's dormant and it does have value, but it requires a trigger. So I do follow a lot of research in physics and astrophysics, and also in genetic. You know, anytime something of new discoveries in genetics, I'm on it. I give it a cursory glance. It's not something I'm really interested in, but because I believe we live in a holosphere, and I believe that this coding is operative through all echelons of society, perceivable existence, then even the DNA is going to show evidence of coding, because that's what it is. It's pure coding. Do I know if DNA is a psyop? I don't know. But I know Crick was absolutely convinced and published later on. He's one of the guys that got the Nobel Prize it was two guys. One of them was Francis Crick. He went on later to publish that he was convinced that DNA is not only ancient, but it's been manipulated and it shows an extraterrestrial origin, meaning that it was not from here. And I tend to agree, because I've told you guys in other prior presentations that I believe that DNA is ancient. It is still being researched. It is a mystery. And outside the construct, it is still as mysterious as it is to us inside the construct. It's fantastically ancient. And the reason the genome of humans is so diverse is because we have lived in so many different biospheres inside the construct. And those biospheres, our environment, is what triggers different gene sequences to either turn on or turn off. So I don't know if it's a psyop, though. I don't know. It wasn't until I started the Archaics channel on YouTube that I even knew there was a mystery involving the World Fairs. I had never seen evidence of it in all my historical research. There's not a single mention in Chronicon of anything unusual about the World Fairs. I'm not saying there's nothing unusual about them. I'm saying I couldn't find anything because I really wasn't searching. Remember, guys, my specialty is not just chronology, but it's in ancient calendar systems. And I've documented meticulously the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st millennium BC. There was nothing about the Anno Domini times that really mystified me. So I just documented it in Chronicon as a matter of course. All I can say is I can believe it happened. And the reason I say this is because it only takes 200 years to go from horse and buggy to Hadron Collider. And because the human tenacity to industrialize and then to become technologically advanced, and then to micronize our technology and to improve it more and more in a 200-year period of time, we can do a tremendous amount. But the historical record goes back 58 centuries. And in the historical record, we have Vimanas, we have machines, we have references to machines and warfare involving weapons that are far beyond anything that a catapult, a scorpion, a giant ballista could have ever done. Things that launched spears that when they detonated, they burned with a white-hot heat of 10,000 suns, and whole entire armies were melted. This is in the historical record, guys. These mentionings. And the Vimana aircraft. We have Sanskrit texts that give us 100 pre-flight checks before you even risk taking your Vimana off the ground. I'm not making any of this. All this can be Googled, guys. This is information that's public domain. So if technology exists at any one point in history, then I have to admit in the possibility that technology has always existed somewhere and in some way. Remember, Captain Nemo, in his submarine was very technologically advanced, and it was traveling around the world. And there's many references in that story of Jules Verne to ancient technologies that were still existing. So yeah, I'm on board. You're asking me something highly specific for which I have no data, but I can say yes, that is very possible. We have evidence from South America that's very compelling that at one time there were visitors in South America that were deemed as benefactors. And we have the stories of Boquica, and we have the stories of Votan and Veracocha, and in Central, in North America we have Quetzalcoatl, and there's many more that we've forgotten or I'm just not naming, but we have these stories of these benefactors that appeared, and they built cities, and they built pyramids, and they spread civilization, and they had these great maritime fleets and ships. And these civilizations that remembered these people for some reason put gold and silver at high value, but not as a currency. All throughout Peru, all Pizarro and all them, when the Spanish conquistadors came, they were absolutely floored to find that these people used gold as if it was a common, ordinary household element. It was everywhere. Gold curtains. They had gardens made of gold. Yeah, the plants in the gardens were fashioned of gold, and they had gemstones and lapis lazuli, like what is that? Turquoise. Yeah, turquoise leaves. They had these beautiful constructions. They had beaten sheets of gold used as insulation in their temples and in their government buildings. Gold was everywhere, but it was everywhere where it could easily be taken and stolen. People had like bird houses, and in the stones in the birdhouse would be huge nuggets of gold. These people did not have a currency value attached to gold. Gold was the metal of the gods, and to be in possession of it was a good thing, but they didn't know why. So we have this in the ancient Americas, not in the old world of Europe, Africa, and Asia, where gold was used as a currency base. It's always used as a currency base. Gold ingots were shipped by the Phoenicians everywhere in ancient banking of the Amuru. So two different hemispheres treated gold very differently. And it seems to be that when there was a cataclysm in 1687 BC, the flood of Ogyges that destroyed the worlds of Africa, Asia, Europe, Easter Island, the entire Pacific was changed, all the sea level raised. Ever since those times, it seems that the people of South America were severed off from the Heleolithic maritime empire that they had valued contact with, and they never came back and got the gold. But I think it was a scheme. I think these strangers had basically found a wealth of gold in South America. They always knew where they could get it. They controlled that area. They patrolled it. They made sure other civilizations had no contact or didn't know about them at all. But they knew anytime they wanted to boost their economy, they could send a fleet of ships to South America and easily get that gold. They maintained very good, solid relations with those people. They probably brought them all kinds of trade wares. Archaeologists have always known that there was some type of exchange back then because artifacts from the old world appeared in the new world, and artifacts from the ancient Americas of animals and different bones and stuff and beads and minerals have been found in Egyptian tombs, have been found in Babylonian sarcophagi. This exchange is very widely known. I mean, talking about large reptiles, large amphibians to me. If you're talking about a winged, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. I mean, large winged creatures have been known. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but the British in 1815 were dynamiting the Strait of Gibraltar, an area of the Strait of Gibraltar, and they were dynamiting it in the limestone to create cannon batteries. And when they had dynamited a certain area, it opened up a cavern, and a pterodactyl-like creature unfolded, squawked a couple times, and fell down. And within an hour, it was already turning to dust. But it had been perfectly entombed, like in stasis, which is something that reptiles do. For those of you who don't know, turtles, frogs, amphibians, and reptiles, when a pond in the desert dries out, those fish don't die. They're in the bottom of the pond, and they'll sit there in the mud, and then the mud will cake in and harden. But a little thin film appears around their body and preserves just what little moisture they need to preserve their little avatars. And then when the next rain comes, it might be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years before that area receives moisture again. And people are astonished because 2 days later, they know that desert hasn't received rain or flooding in a decade, and the pond is full of fish. So it's This is not uncommon. So this battery in 1815, it was documented that this creature had unfolded. It had wings. It was described. They didn't know what a pterodactyl was back then, but we know now today. But what it was described of was a pterodactyl, and it came out after it was dynamited out. The cavern entrance collapsed from the cannon battery, and it squawked a couple times and just collapsed forward. It stank to high heaven, and it's an interesting deal. But it's not the only one. There has been other creatures that have been found in solid limestone that when engineers or workmen were tunneling or digging, they go into a recess and they find a perfectly preserved creature that dies within seconds as soon as they come into contact with oxygen. But yeah, I don't know. The Essenes were a doomsday cult. 31 BC Phoenix phenomenon that destroyed the ancient Americas. It was the last date on Olmec stele. It was when the fiery sky dragon appeared over ancient Egypt. It was the Battle of Actium when Rome was at civil war and Queen Cleopatra died and Antony. Major earthquakes through Greece and Judea. Jerusalem was damaged. Some historians say it was the worst earthquake ever at that time. It was 31 BC. That same earthquake collapsed the area that the Essenes were living in. And this is why today we have the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in those Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Essene literature, we have references to them waiting for a period of time when the world was going to be destroyed. And what's really interesting is they're a doomsday cult. And according to Issachara, she says they were waiting on the Phoenix cycle. That's profound, guys, because 31 BC was the Phoenix cycle of 552 years. A doomsday cult of pre-Gnostics called the Essenes actually suffered the very thing that they believed in, the coming of an apocalypse. And it happened in their time. And it was the Phoenix cycle. And as anybody knows my Phoenix research, you understand that a 552-year period ended in 31 BC and began and led to the next one. And the 552 years Phoenix cycle was ancient. And for us to find a reference from the scholar Esakara about that is astonishing. This triggers a lot of people. They don't want to hear it. They just don't want to hear it. But the age of the Old Testament, I hate even talking about these topics. Biblical scholars, you can research you can Google all the biblical scholars you want. They're all in agreement. There is no evidence of antiquity of the Old Testament. There's none. If you think there's a bunch of ancient books that show you the story of Moses, you're wrong. Moses is not mentioned in a single ancient record. It's almost as if the Old Testament just appeared on the scene within 100 years before the New Testament appeared on the scene. Philo Judaicus mentions many people that are mentioned in the Old Testament. Philo Judaicus mentions, this is like 80 BC, 80 to 30 BC. Philo Judaicus mentions everything, but it is also widely known that we do not know what he was citing, because it seems that he had a whole different take on a lot of different topics. It's almost as if Philo Judaicus had a basic overview of what the Old Testament was later going to be very specific about. Yeah. And it's crazy. So Flavius Josephus suddenly gives us, Flavius Josephus is the very first. It suddenly gives us in Wars of the Jews and in his book Antiquities. Now we have all this data that tells us about the Old Testament, tells us about all these things in the Old Testament. The problem is it seems like the Old Testament was published at the same time as Flavius Josephus's books came out. So yeah, my Dark Scriptures playlist goes into more detail about this. But yeah, for those who want to believe, I understand, man. I was a Southern Baptist Christian for the first 40 years of my life. The Bible is a book I know very well. And those who have, my Archaics veterans know this, seen my presentations in the Dark Scriptures playlist, that I'm telling you, were these sources, we can trace the sources for most of the Old Testament where they came from. All pre-Jewish sources. But I'm telling you, there's no antiquity here. There's none. If you think the Old Testament is a collection of books that came from a single source, then the burden of proof is on you to show that, because the biblical scholars can't. Hey, Merrill, there's no evidence that that's happening every 138 years. The Phoenix phenomenon is many different things. What we have is a 138-year periodicity of a phenomenon that's happening, but that phenomenon takes on many forms. It changes. It's very unusual, and I've documented it for you guys in my Phoenix archive playlist, like 70 videos now. It's very interesting. Now, many times, yes, every 138 years, it's red rains, red musk, yeah. It is. I don't know. I don't really have a theory. I do know that Harold T. Wilkins had a theory in the 1950s, and I used to follow that theory. I no longer follow it, but I used to. His theory was that Phoenix is an intruder planet. His theory is that a glaciosphere was ripped off of the surface of a frozen dead world, and that all that ice, this comes from an old theory from Hans Bellamy, called the Cosmic Ice Theory, 1902. Hans Bellamy believed that an intruder planet had a glaciosphere that ripped off of it, and that's where all the extra water appeared in our world and froze at the northern and southern extremes, creating the polar caps. He said when it passes every time after that, the red dirt that makes up the outer surface of that world, more and more of that red dust and red dirt is ripped off of the surface, and it creates these massive dust veils, and Earth passes through these dust veils. And every bit of that scenario was very plausible to me back when I believed that the sky was an actual representation of a real universe, and that we weren't living in a holofield, in a construct. I believe his theory is demonstrating what the simulation shows will be true in the future. I don't want to confuse you guys. Remember, I am of the belief that we are running simulations on the outside of the construct and that you and I are here experiencing them, and that we've run many simulations. And on the outside of the construct, what Harold T. Wilkins is describing exactly what is really going to happen. These events, the Nemesis Cataclysm, hasn't happened yet. We're preparing for it by running all these simulations. And I come to these conclusions by the fact that I have studied so many thousands of data points in constructed data sets from calendars. And our calendars of the ancient world do not make sense because they all involve the appearance of something in the sky for the first time. And when a new object appeared, it started another calendar. And when a new object appeared, it started another calendar. And these calendars have definitive periods attached to them that we are led to believe are orbits. So putting all this data together has made me believe that I live in a construct, and that construct is a byproduct of other humans on the outside of that construct running simulations for which I'm an active participant. I'm living through these things. And that the actual Nemesis Cataclysm that we're preparing for by virtue of all these scientific simulations has not yet happened. So when Harold T. Wilkins publishes books in the 1950s describing the glacial sphere ripped off another world, I can say, yes, that's true. But that's true of what we project is going to be happening once the Nemesis Cataclysm catapults its worlds straight at our solar system. Yeah, the cataclysm we are preparing for is basically one system colliding into another one because a star implodes. So, yeah, it's really hard to answer some of these questions without providing that context. Remember, guys, archaics are there's nothing of surface value here. You have to really get deep into the archaics data in all my presentations to understand why I believe the things I believe about this construct and about these simulations, and that yes, it can be true that this is a glacial sphere and the red dust and red mud comes from the surface of an intruder world, but that's not what's actually happening in here. In here, the sky is completely simulated. What we call Neanderthals did exist. Is the scientific picture that we're giving accurate? Nope. I believe at one time they were very sophisticated and they lost their infrastructure and they basically became what we perceive them to be. Another race was injected called the Cro-Magnon. And by this time, the Neanderthals had lost their infrastructure, lost their identity. They're living as animals. And archaeologists have found actual Neanderthal camps, excavated them. And in those camps, they have found bone yards, bone piles discarded of Cro-Magnon skeletons with tool marks on the bones, meaning that they were cannibalizing them. So, I believe Neanderthals at one time were the apex predators. They were the top. There are even books, I think it was by Frank Joseph, about the kingdom of the Atlantis and the kingdom of the Neanderthals. There is evidence that the Neanderthals were advanced at one time, but something happened. Just like we know for a fact now that the Cro-Magnon were advanced, but then the collapse of the total collapse of their infrastructure, something happened. But with the Cro-Magnon, we have a higher level of sophistication surviving. They painted these beautiful murals all over their walls, and they even used the surface features of the caves to produce 3D effects. But even more so is the Cro-Magnon buried their dead with great rituals and gave their dead all kinds of items for which they could pass on to the other side. But even more convincing that the Phoenix phenomenon had ended their civilization was it was very important for the Cro-Magnon to bury the dead using red ochre. They used red, that's why they're called the red ochre people. But the red ochre was always used in a reverent funerary way. And I believe it's because that's what ended their civilization, was the red ochre falling from the sky. That's called dendrochronology, and it's been disproven. It was used widely for about a good 60 years, and then some scientists had come forward with some new data, and they were resisted at first, but now it's common knowledge. Now no scientist worth his mettle is going to actually use dendrochronology as an accurate method of analysis, because it's been shown that a tree will grow 2, sometimes 3 rings a year. And now, it used to be believed that 1 ring signified 1 year, and several books were published giving the wrong dates for historical events. Those books were never republished and corrected, because science never moves backward to do that type of editing. Scientists are always about moving forward, even when the information they're moving on is absolutely full of error. So with dendrochronology, that's what we have. We have a situation where a lot of scientific books are still sticking to the original dates, but the carbon-14, the relative dating methods, the ice core data, and the dendrochronological materials have all been proven wrong, but the dates are still fixed. Scientists stick to their guns. Well, first of all, if you're the elite and you know that a significant event in the future will decimate a quarter of the world's population, and you want to be in firm position to reappear from your underground facilities with your technology intact, knowing that the surface world has been destabilized, you're going to want to make sure that it's truly destabilized. You're not going to want, this is a military tactic. This has absolutely nothing to do with right and wrong, ethics, any of that. If you're a part of the ruling structure, the ruling body, believe me, those military facilities underground, they have whole arsenals full of every weapon you can imagine, even jets, even whole ships. Everything's down there. It's been prepared for a long time for an event like what we're preparing for in 2040. By 2036, they will be completely firmly locked away in the underground facilities all around the world. This is why the military-industrial complex is all allied to each other. This is why the U.S. military has allowed for all this crazy, weird shit that's been going on in the past 2 and 3 years in America. It's not about rights, privileges, and immunities, preserving the Constitution. All of that, that's just for the public domain. What's really going on is a massive amount of preparations, and that takes wealth. All this fleecing the American people for all this money. Where do you think this money? You really think this money's going to Ukraine? Stop it. It's way too many stimulus packages. It's way too many trillions of dollars for a small country over here on the other side of the world getting its ass kicked by Russia. That's not where all this money's going. It's not. It takes a lot of money to prepare for an event of this magnitude. They've done it before. So they're doing it again. And yeah, I don't believe at all. I don't know if I agree with you about the depopulation. 600 million people die from something. It doesn't knock a dent in our population. It doesn't knock a dent in our population. It really doesn't. 600 million babies will be born next year. Or, well, close to it. So I don't know if I agree with, because your question is laced with an assertion. So I don't know if I agree with the assertion yet that what's going on is a massive depopulation. That 30 million people die in the context of however many people are actually here. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know if the data's real. I don't know if that's just fear mongering, all the stuff we're hearing. I just don't know. So I can't give you a really good answer on that. Kelly Everett, good question. I don't believe so. You got to understand, I've told you guys my personal belief. I believe the oversoul is in such control that it doesn't require us to fear it. The oversoul is such a loving God that even a disbelief in its existence will not change the trajectory of not only your life, but even your afterlife, which is your real life to me. Remember, I believe that we live on the opposite side, the photo negative of a real reality. So even our arithmetic gives us all kinds of hints that we live on the wrong side. We're not living on the actual real side of reality. And because we live in a fictive medium and everything here is a fiction, no, I don't believe that because you disbelieve something, it's going to have a negative impact on you. at all. I mean, some of my Christian values remain intact, and that is an appreciation for eschatology, because I believe a lot of that is very pre-Christian. It comes from older records, such as the book of Revelation. I told you through the writings of Cerinthus, ultimately comes from the Sibylline oracles and was very ancient. Yeah, the Christians just called it the Revelation and they just assigned it to John, but the actual writings are very, very Semitic, Sumerian, Akkadian. So I'm thinking that, to he that overcometh, I'll give him a white robe. I mean, there's a lot of ways to translate that, but I don't think your personal belief in anything is going to come with any personal consequences. I believe that's fear programming. That's dungeon programming. That's what religions want you to believe, because all religions are attached to control systems. Now, I believe you're going to be judged strictly on what you have done and what you haven't done on the actual perimeters of your personality. So yeah, I don't belief has everything to do with the data that you've come in contact with. So for you to be judged on your contact with certain informations and their acceptability would be anomalous. That doesn't even sound like anything a true oversoul would be, because an oversoul is the origin of acceptance and love. Then why would it ever impugn upon you some terrible fate because you didn't believe in it? A loving God would accept you whether you believed or not. And then that would ultimately bring you back to it, to a believing state. So yeah, that's my take on it. And this is a book that was sent to me today. I got it in the mail today. I've told you guys about this guy. He is the director of the Institute for the American Institute of Pyramid Research. His name is Larry Paul. He's been to Egypt many times. Recently, he went into the Grand Gallery and he took some pictures for me and some measurements. And I have a profound interest with the Grand Gallery ever since I did my Antiquitech video where I showed those 100-year-old pictures of the other entrance to the Great Pyramid that you never hear about in any books on Egyptology. So he went and he did some looking around for me and took a bunch of pictures and sent me his latest published book. Now, I haven't read it yet. I just got it today. But as soon as I saw this picture, I knew that I'm about to read this whole book. This is what I have described to you guys in the past. Why the actual head of the Sphinx is way disproportionate to the rest of the body. And it's because a pharaoh put a man's face where an animal's face used to be. Only an animal's face fulfills the geometry that's there in the rest of the body, which he speculates was a dog or a jackal. Oh yeah, this book's going to be very interesting. Larry, I'll do a video on the book, on basically his data, the material he sends me, and you guys know it's going to be something that's going to be interesting. I'm glad you guys like my video about the Osirion and its discovery in 1902, and the actual images. Those are technolithic. If you noticed, underneath the technolithic stuff that was found behind the plaster, machines did those pictures. That wasn't hammer and chisel that did those straight lines. The pictures I showed you in those reliefs at the Osirion, listen, those are all machined, and the Egyptians didn't know what they were, so they covered it in plaster. And you can see underneath them in another picture that shows it at a greater distance. You see where the Egyptians actually painted their hieroglyphics on underneath that on the plaster. So, yeah, that video is already getting some traction. I think 13,000 people have already seen that one.